One thing I hate getting stuck in is what I call the social media cycle. You know when you're switching from Instagram to Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, and then back to Instagram, and the cycle just continues? On a deeper level, what that is the dopamine reward system. The constant swiping, searching for the next hit of dopamine, you get lost in it. You're not really there. What really got to me was the discovery that these technologies were made this way. Ever heard of the term slot machine apps? For example, infinite scrolling on your feed, never giving you that indicator that, hey, maybe it's time to get off. A perfect example is the pull to refresh feature, which is basically like the lever of a slot machine. It takes advantage of our attraction to the unpredictability of a reward. An unpredictable reward schedule keeps people interested and using the app for longer than they intend to. Social media companies want to capture attention for as long and as frequently as possible. Why? Because it's profitable. It tells you something when the engineers and VPs of these tech companies don't even let their own kids use the technology that they made. They know what kind of addictive mechanisms underlie the apps. It's as if they're taking behavioral cocaine and sprinkling it all over your interface. And that's the thing that keeps you coming back and back and back, said former Mozilla and Java employee Azar Raskin. Many companies taking advantage of an understanding of human nature, psychology, and the dopamine reward system to keep us consuming these technologies.
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these are weaponized. You have social statisticians and scientists and researchers and people in lab coats, literally best minds of our generation, of figuring out how to addict you to the news.
Remember how I mentioned addictive, unpredictable reward schedule? This stems from B.F. Skinner's studies on operant conditioning. He discovered that the type of reinforcement that has the slowest rate of extinction is the variable interval reinforcement. Really, this is just a fancy way of saying that people will repeat the same behavior for the longest amount of time without reinforcement when that reinforcement is given after an unpredictable amount of time. His findings indicate that, simply put, we, like other organisms, learn to engage in behaviors that result in positive outcomes and avoid those that result in negative ones. The more unambiguously the ratio is linked to the reward, the more it is reinforced. What all this made me realize is that I'm an addict. I'm not strung out on coke, white powder all over my nose, scratching my neck, but behaviorally, there's an activity that I continue to do in aims of seeking a reward despite the consequences. But what separates me from a coke fiend? You see, addiction is a tricky thing. On a certain reductive level, addiction is just your brain learning to behave in a certain way. I'm going to come back to this learning aspect because it's actually really important. But behavior could be drinking a few beers, spending a few hours on social media, or snorting coke. Yes, there's levels to this shit. But neurologically, your brain changes. You learn to desire these substances, followed by reinforcement through reward. No one is 100% immune to become an addict. You're human. That's why addicts can't just quit. It's not as simple as a choice problem. Their brains become hardwired for dependency on these substances. Core to everything is the neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule in our brain that mediates reward. A rise in dopamine levels causes a behavior which our body deems as worth doing. Typically, these behaviors are essential, such as feeding yourself, but the system can't distinguish between behaviors that are essential and non-essential. Any behavior that's pleasurable can be associated with the system. In a way, these non-essential behaviors hijack our dopamine reward system, replacing behaviors that used to contribute to our well-being with behaviors that often don't. Every time we find something new or exciting on social media, our brains release dopamine, which tells our bodies that social media is worth doing again. Dopamine is not just about pleasure, but it's also about the anticipation of pleasure. With features such as notifications and alerts, it isn't long before the dopamine rush associated with seeing something new or exciting translates to our brains releasing dopamine in anticipation of checking our phones. Not too long after that, we start to check our phones when we feel insecure or anxious. If we could just distract ourselves, then we'll escape those feelings. But they'll come back. Back to learning. Skinner's findings helped discover an evolutionary mechanism we call reward-based learning, which remarkably is conserved all the way back to the sea slug. This basically means that it's conserved all throughout the animal kingdom. I don't know about you, but I think it's amazing when I discover different ways that we're just so closely related with other animals. The basis of reward-based learning is trigger, behavior, reward, and repeat. Now, for example, with social media, the trigger could be an urge to post on Instagram. The behavior would be actually posting, and the reward would be the amount of likes that you get. This cycle explains our learned behaviors. It can be reinforced to the point where people push a reward lever mindlessly, which is what actually often happens with addicts. If I had to really condense it down further, it's really about our desire for reward and the feeling associated with it. Pleasure. But what's wrong with pleasure? Honestly, nothing. We're built to experience pleasure. It keeps us alive. The real problem is what Naval Ravikant calls the modern struggle.
I think the modern struggle is really about lone individuals disconnected from their tribe, disconnected from their religions, disconnected from their cultural networks, trying to stand up to all these things that have been weaponized: alcohol, drugs, pornography, processed foods, news media, internet, social media, video games. With these things, you can basically engage in fake play and fake work that are giving you small doses of pleasure, but desensitizing you and exposing you to the misery of their loss and their absence. In some very deep level, all pleasure creates its own offsetting pain and fear of loss on the other side.
That last quote really sat with me. There have been countless times where I get out of the app feeling anxious, or I go to the app because I felt some slight discomfort and I want to distract myself, feel good for a bit, and then when I come back to reality, nothing's really changed. Honestly, the discomfort probably is intensified. And I discovered a clue as to what that very deep level is. In the book Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Work by Rahul, he writes about the amygdala, a brain structure commonly known as the fear center of the brain, which has a distinct role in pleasure. The amygdala isn't about the pleasure of experiencing pleasure. It's about the uncertain, unsettled yearning for potential pleasure, the anxiety and fear and anger that the reward may be smaller than anticipated, or may not even happen. It's about how many of our pleasures and our pursuits of them contain a corrosive vein of disease. Curious as to how Dr. Sapolsky thought about pleasure seeking and the modern struggle, I shot him an email. He replied, on a certain reductive level, the tragedy of being human is the speed with which our dopamine system has to habituate in order to accommodate the uniquely human, enormous range of potential pleasures. Thus is the soundbite that kind of summarizes this for me. What was a pleasurable surprise yesterday is what you feel entitled to today, and what will seem insufficient tomorrow. He agreed with my sense of that not seeking pleasure ironically makes for more cumulative happiness, and thinks that it makes one a kinder person as well. Things just seem stacked up against me. I'm fighting for my attention and happiness against large corporations with deep understandings of human nature and psychology, and I'm not supposed to be addicted. It makes me feel like a guinea pig in this much larger experiment. My first experience with social media was when I was made a Facebook when I was in 8th grade. Ever since then, they've only improved, gotten more addictive. I wonder about how these technologies can affect kids who have only known phones, who have only known weapons of mass distraction. No doubt these technologies have improved our lives and productivity, but what sorts of habits are we reinforcing in the generations to come? Damn near every teenager drives with one hand on the wheel and that phone in the other. We're becoming more self-centered than I'd like to admit, and I really don't know where all this leads. And in an age of abundance, pursuing pleasure for its own sake creates addiction. Pleasure isn't wrong. You shouldn't feel guilty about enjoying yourself. This is more of a message to those people who are mindlessly distracting themselves with media, drugs, or porn, and then after they sit back and wonder why they're so miserable. With social media, there's something pleasurable about talking and getting feedback about yourself. But instead of posting to feel good, people can learn to post to make unpleasant feelings like sadness go away. The more you reinforce this behavior, the more likely it is to become automatic, habitual, and even addictive. You evade your core problem being your internal sadness or loneliness, and you mindlessly press that lever, unfortunately making your problems even worse. Thankfully, we have scientists studying mechanisms like reward-based learning and offering insight. I read the book Craving by Judson Brewer, an addiction psychiatrist. In his work with addiction patients, He saw a common theme between their stories and reward-based learning. To help treat them, he employed a mindfulness treatment setting. He mapped their triggers, how they reinforced behavior, and instructed them to pay attention to what the reward felt like. Amazingly, his patients saw profound results. Why? Apparently, seeing what we really get from our habits essentially updates that new information to our brains and helps us understand the reward on a deeper level. We won't need to control the craving as much when we're able to clearly see how it's negatively affecting us. After teaching his participants to be okay with cravings and start being willing to turn inwards towards experience, as opposed to making cravings go away as fast as possible, he taught them the acronym RAIN. Recognize and relax into what is arising, being craving, emotion, or feeling. Accept and allow it to be there. Investigate your bodily sensations or emotions and thoughts. Essentially what's happening in your body or mind at that moment. And then know what is happening moment to moment. Not just beneficial for addicts, but anyone can use this mindfulness technique to help break undesired or non-essential behaviors. When you're in the midst of your addiction, take a moment to reflect on what you're actually seeking out of the experience. Dr. Brewer's work asks you to experience that feeling fully and turn inwards to experience. That'll give you some insight. If you see your habit or addiction physically, emotionally, or socially robbing you of what you want out of life, then it's time to take a step back. It's not 100% your fault that you're addicted to these pleasures, but it is your responsibility to take care of your well-being by standing up to the modern struggle. Instead of pleasure, seek meaning. For me, it's not going to come from a screen.
Why sell pants with the zippers? Yikes! Meditors even already hit it twice.
What's good, guys? I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Please leave a like, and if you guys enjoy my content, please consider subscribing as well. So I do want to tell you guys that I just made a Patreon. So I'm going to be releasing, I think, a podcast and some other videos and stuff. So make sure to go and check that out. Link will be in the description down below. So there you guys go. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.